Welcome to the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wiss. I'm joined by Jonathan Faduba, and we are ready for another interesting, action-packed episode, fresh from our traveller on the show here, Jonathan, who has been over in Sweden. Welcome back, my friend. I hope you had some great travels.
Hi, Steve. Hi, everybody. Yes, I am sadly back in the UK from an amazing trip to Gothenburg. Really had a great time reconnecting with a lot of people. And of course, if you follow us on Twitter at Nordic Football, hopefully you might have seen some of the match action and things like that I was posting, and some clips of the city and that. But yes, now I'm back in England and back to normality, but I had a fantastic time.
Yeah, I'm glad you had a great time over there. And we've got some sort of after match interviews with some players that you got from the games that you took in. You certainly didn't lack for seeing goals, did you, Jonathan? You were in attendance for the Häcken game against Djurgården and the IFK against Degerfors. I mean, IFK have never scored so many goals, have they, in recent times? And you turn up as a lucky charm. But yeah, I mean, I know you were really looking forward to this trip into Gothenburg. And of course, you lived out there for several years in the past, very familiar with the area. I know you've not been over there since COVID time. So, I mean, there was a lot of excitement for you heading back over into Sweden. How was the feel of the city?
Yeah, it was really good. It was funny because when I arrived, you get a bus basically into the city centre from the airport, and I used to live, briefly lived in Gothenburg for a bit, and I lived in Hisingen, which is where BK Häcken is based, and I mistakenly took the bus all the way to Hisingen. the airport bus, I got off at the wrong stop, as if I was going to Hisingen, which is instead of going to where my hotel was based. So I suddenly got to the central station. I was like, wait a minute, I'm in the wrong area. But what it allowed me, Steve, was a little view of the bridge that crosses into Hisingen. As my first port of call sort of thing, and I was trying to get back into the city, and just looking at that bridge, mate, that magnificent bridge, it brought back a lot of memories, like 4 a.m. sort of trying to get home and stuff like that, and after a night out, or just just going home in general across that bridge. And that bridge has got a special memory for me. Actually, I think I tweeted a video of crossing into it the next day on the way to the Häcken game.
Yeah,
but you sort of, as Gothenburg split into two parts basically, and you cross this sort of bridge. It's a port city, of course, and that bridge, just brought back a lot of memories, a lot of reminiscing. I was fortunate enough to see some old friends, some people that you know, Steve, of course, who we worked together previously with. Caught up with a good friend of ours, Sam Hart, and some people at IFK as well that I knew from when I was there. So yeah, it was emotional. It was quite emotional actually to be back in Gothenburg, and it's a city that's definitely close to my heart.
Yeah, and of course, Hisingen, that is actually in Ireland, isn't it? I think you once told me it's where BK Häcken are located. Famously, where you did that interview with Sonny Carlson all those years ago, and during that interview, of course, he said the ambition is to win the league, and they got that incredible title last season. But I mean, you were out there for the midweek round. Sweden is now 7 rounds old, actually. But I'm just going to run through the results from round number 6, which was midweek. There were some absolute thumpings on the card, it must be said. Not in Mjällby, though. Mjällby 0, IFK 0, Kalmar 2, Sirius 2, Häcken with a 4-1 win against Djurgården. You were in attendance for that one. Elfsborg smashing Halmstad 6-1. Brommapojkarna continued their good form with a 1-0 win against Värnamo. Malmö 6, Varberg 0, away win there for Malmö. Norrköping beat Hammarby 2-0, and then IFK Göteborg beat Degerfors 6-0. Another match that you were in attendance for. We've got most of round 7 is complete. I will run through the scores. Malmö continued at 100% record, 3-1 win against IFK. Halmstad, shock win, 1-0 against Häcken. I don't think anyone saw that one coming. Elfsborg with an amazing come-from-behind win this evening, 4-3 against Sirius. Djurgården 3, Kalmar 1. Norrköping with a 2-0 win against Degerfors, and a 0-0 draw between Brommapojkarna and IFK. The table looks like this. We've still got 2 matches to play this round. At Malmö, 100% record, 7 wins out of 7. Elfsborg in second and Häcken in third. So, yeah, I mean, it was a round where there was a lot of goals around, some big beatings. We're going to start in Gothenburg. The first match you were in attendance for was Häcken, the defending champions, against Djurgården, who won the league. Was it 2 or 3 years ago now? I can't remember, Jonathan, but 2 recent champions in the league anyway. I mean, I saw some of the highlights of this game. I saw some of your tweets and the videos. It looks like the atmosphere was good.
Yeah, the last time I was there, they were not champions, and obviously this is the first season they've been champions ever. BK Häcken defending champs, and it was nice going back to the game to see them. So I took the bus over from central Gothenburg to Hisingen. Went out a little walk around, had a cup of tea. Famously, Swedes are not really familiar with tea. The cafe, I had to ask, they were asking me what is a tea and how do I make it, basically. I think the guy asked me, do I put the water with the milk first? Or like, he was totally confused in some bar in Hisingen. But yeah, I had a little pre-match drink. Then I took a walk to, need to give a shout out to, hang on, let me just get the right pronunciation. Took a walk over to Getting Torget, which is on Wieselgrenzplatsen, which is like basically a pre-match, like a hangout spot for Häcken fans. It's really cool. Never actually been there before. There's like video games and a massive pub. It's really nice, like basically a Häcken pub. The fish and chips looked amazing, by the way. I really wanted to stay and have fish and chips, but I didn't have time. So it was very busy as well. Obviously, fans. You can buy like sausages, hot dogs. So had a little walk around there with a couple of people. Met a good friend of ours, had a cheeky beer, and then walked over to the stadium, which is about 5-10 minute walk tops. Inside the stadium, obviously we were accredited, so Nordic Pod had the treatment. We got the media seats, and yeah, it felt really nice to be back there. And I think in terms of the game itself, Steve, obviously they won 4-1. They were 1-0 down at halftime. Joel Asoro scored, and didn't really have a good first half. Häcken, they looked a little bit kind of off it. And I think the manager, apparently, I read a post-match, Per Mattis Hogmar asked the players, like, how many goals can you score in the second half? And they went out and answered it with 4 goals in one half. Lars Olden Larsen scored twice, and Evan Hovland, 2 goals from the centre-back, both from set pieces. So second half, they just turned it up. They just turned it on. They were really good. And the fans were, one thing I noticed is like there's a lot more Häcken fans at the stadium than there was when I was there. Obviously the success, that creates more support, and they were really loud. I felt like the fan culture was a lot stronger. The fans were really getting behind the team, even at 1-0 down, and kind of carried them, helped them along in the second half. And yeah, they just upped the game. Häcken have got some really nice footballers. And yeah, in terms of the game itself, I had a couple of sort of observations, I think. But yeah, like I say, Asoro got the poacher's goal. Then it was headers from corner from Hovland. Lars Olden Larsen's his goal, his first goal was unbelievable. 25-yard curler, top corner. I just put him on my fantasy team, so I was delighted with that as well. But the big player in the game for me, Steve, was I think Gustafsson. Samuel Gustafsson. I thought he ran the show from midfield. I thought it was exceptional. Häcken really good. They play these nice triangles, the patterns of play. I really felt they were a complete team. It's a bit strange now because they've just lost their most recent game against Halmstad, but I really came away from that game feeling like they're a complete team. Häcken, they can play from set pieces. They can play sort of passing triangles. They can play in patterns of play. And if you want to sort of take them on and press high, they can play off the counter attack in behind you with the pace that they have in forward areas. And they could also play through the lines as well. Players like Rygaard, Gustafsson, they can play through the lines. So if you play a deep block, that's fine. They can pick you apart. So I really came away from it feeling like Häcken are a complete team in many ways. And I think they will challenge for the title. But of course, the only worry is maybe the defence. And they have had a few injuries. And those 1 or 2 issues that I think maybe they have to worry about against this amazing Malmo team that we discussed last week. But yeah, it was really, really nice to be back. The stadium is exactly the same. It's a nice little Bravida Arena. It's sort of nice and pokey. It's not a big stadium, but it does the job. And they must be really looking forward to sort of Champions League football there. I bet they're buzzing for it. But the fans in general and the atmosphere was really good.
Yeah, Lars Olden Larsen. I remember him at Mjøndalen actually in Norway. Had a decent second season there actually with them. I think the manager changed him into a striker actually there at one point. But he didn't do an awful lot last year for Häcken, but he's started this year like a house on fire. He's actually forced me to bring him into my fantasy team against my best wishes, but I had to bring him in. Yeah, I mean, we know this team's full of goals. We know on these, certainly at home, they can outscore literally anyone. Perhaps can they dig in on a tough grass surface away at a side like Halmstad? Maybe this year they can't. But Evan Hovland with 2 goals there. I mean, I know he's very useful. He's a big leader for them, isn't he? Did you notice him in his presence on the field that has maybe been the difference, converting this team into champions from last season?
Yeah, he had a difference. I think they actually played a sort of unfamiliar back four because Sandberg played as a centre back, which I don't think he's played before this season at least, or maybe he has in 1 or 2 games. But there's been a few injuries. Obviously, Totland as well wasn't there. So the fullbacks Fredriksson and Lund, they did okay. I actually felt Diff played well, and we're going to talk about Djurgården a little bit in this show as well, because we haven't talked about them much, and obviously having seen them live, I thought they did well in the first half. But they started to just sit deeper and deeper in the second half, and that didn't really help. I thought that the centre backs, I thought that Benny Traore actually struggled against Marcus Danielsson and Lofgren as the 2 centre backs. Häcken were playing a 4-3-3, Djurgården playing kind of 4-2-1-2 or 4-2-1-3, depending on how you wanted to look at it. Essentially with Joel Asoro up front, but Marcus Berg in kind of like a floating role. So it was a strange sort of. I think up front they were good first half, but I still think they don't really have. Still, we'll talk about Djurgården in a minute anyway. But they put in a really strong performance, like I say, first half. But they've got leaders like Hovland now. You mentioned Larson there. It was interesting because he was asked post match, do you think maybe you might leave Häcken? Do you think you'll get so much interest because he's one of the top scorers in the league? I think he's the top assist provider in the league at the moment, if not one of the top goal plus
probably
assists.
Goals and assists. I think
So yeah, he took his goals brilliantly, and he was asked, do you think there'll be interest? And he said, listen, where I found a home at Häcken, he basically said he's never been treated so well. And he said that he's found his home here and he wants to stay. He celebrated his goal like mad. There's one thing you don't get to see when you watch games on TV. Obviously, sometimes, the camera pans away. But when he scored, he was like sort of shushy in the crowd, and he was loving it. Actually, his first goal. It was a brilliant strike. And yeah, of course, when they have players like that who can up their gear. Rygaard is a quality player. He can just up a level. Gustafsson's too good for Svensson, honestly. For me, he was the best player on the pitch. I thought he was that exceptional. And then you've got forwards like Traore. Traore didn't actually have a good game, in my opinion. I thought he was pocketed a little bit. But what I felt Djurgården actually got. I thought they'd done a number on them, and I thought this is going to be tough for Häcken. But the way they just carved them open in the second half, the way they upped the tempo with their passing was really impressive to watch. And when you've got Larson on one side, you've got Traore kind of going through the middle, and Udenas wasn't great. He went off, and they sort of changed things around a bit. Mamadou Sonko, if you go and listen to our Svenskan Center watch, you might hear a bit more about him. But I thought he had an impact off the bench, and the options from the bench I felt changed the game. I think Udenas. I actually said to Sam, who I was with, I said I think they should take off Udenas and switch Traore to the right hand side, which I don't think they quite did. But basically, Traore was struggling against the physicality of Danielsson. But when they changed it around a little bit second half, it paid off, and they just went to a new tempo. I think maybe the one thing they lack is, compared to last season, is that Jeremiev presence. I think that's where they are maybe a little bit. I think Ola Kamara's not quite fit, and of course we saw them lose against Halmstad, and they brought him on in the second half. And I think that's one area that maybe physically, if you can overpower them and keep that ability, if you can keep the midfielders away, if you can sort of block off the midfield from the attack, if you know what I mean, and then overpower them physically. Because Traore is quite a short player, actually. He's not the biggest. That's maybe one way to play them. But they showed that they've got that experience now of champions, and I think we had a listener question, didn't we? Like, do you think it'll be a one-off? But I think they can stick around. I think they can go from here and maybe grow as a club, because it seems to be the area is growing, and there's a sort of fan culture there that makes me feel that they can continue to maybe challenge IFK as the number one in Gothenburg.
Yeah, and that's where they've surprised me a bit so far, because in my experience, when this sort of thing happens, the next season's really hard to do it again. I questioned Buda Glimt when they won that first title, and they completely proved me wrong the second season. Häcken may well do the same, not in terms of winning the league, because they are up against a monster of a side in Malmo. But if they finish second, I would actually be really, really impressed with them. But they've really squad built well, haven't they? Credit to the manager, credit to the recruitment team. They've got a really good balance there. And so immediately after the game, Jonathan was able to get some reaction from BK Häcken player Blair Turgott, who unfortunately is injured right now. But it was great to hear his thoughts on several things regarding the game and also football in general over there in Sweden.
All right, I'm joined by Blair Turgott, who's at the Brevide Arena. Häcken have just won 4-1, and of course on the Nordic Football Podcast, we followed your career for a while since you moved from non-league to Allsvenskan, obviously at Östersunds, and then Häcken.
Yeah.
Just obviously you had a really unfortunate injury recently, but how's your time been in Sweden so far, like since you've moved?
Yeah, man, it's been good. I've enjoyed it. Obviously, like I said, when I first come, I was at a different team. And obviously this season, or the last season, we won the league, which was really amazing. And then this season, unfortunately, I'm injured, but it's good to see the team still doing well and still winning. So yeah, it's really good.
What would you say is like the main difference between, say, non-league football and when you first moved to Östersunds, if you get what I mean?
I just think probably it's more technical. Obviously, English football is really like renowned for being like physical and fast tempo, but here's a lot more slower, a lot more maybe in the mind. You have to use your mind more. The tactics, teams are really in depth of how they go through games, and yeah, it's good, man. It's really technical, and I like it. To be fair, it's nice.
You came through West Ham's academy, and obviously you had a lot of experiences out in England. Do you feel like you benefited from the move to Sweden? Like, do you think it's helped your career a lot? Like, I think it's something you've enjoyed.
Yeah, for sure. I think when I come to establish myself. The sort of football that was playing abroad is probably more suited to me as well. Got into the Jamaica national team and scored many goals, so it's been good and it's been positive. Obviously, there's just a small blip in the road at the moment because of the injury, but I'll be back in no time, and hopefully we can keep pushing forward.
Yeah. And I remember when obviously the last day of the season when you won the league, obviously against the IFK Göteborg, you played in that game. How was it like winning the league here? And
yeah, it was amazing.
First time you've won the league.
Yeah, it was amazing, especially my family come over to watch the game. It's a derby match, and to win the league, score a goal, it was what dreams are made of kind of thing, So it was my first silverware as a player, so it was nice as well, and yeah, it was perfect.
And like in terms of the difference between Östersunds and Häcken, what would you say? Like, I know both clubs have like a family feel. Like, I know Ian Birchnell, and a couple of the coaches there, Sean Constable as well, for example, we've had on the podcast. How would you describe the difference between the two clubs when you moved?
I think every team has, great individuals, but I think the squad itself has got a strong team, good players, and you can see, we're in good form, and especially from last season, we've kind of carried it on. We just keep going, and the focus is, even if we win, we have to keep training hard and keep working hard. So the standards are always there, and we push each other, and the staff push each other, and it's got a good formula for a good team.
And if you were picking a five-a-side team from the Häcken squad, like obviously they got so many good players, who would you? Obviously you'd be in there somewhere, but who would you?
I'll be in there for sure. But I would say Evan at the back, Hovland, Mikael Regard, Ibra Siddiq, and me.
That's four. You got one more.
Samuel then. Samuel Gustafsson.
Yeah.
Class player.
And final question, obviously, before I let you go, I really appreciate your time. What's it like working with the manager? Because obviously when the manager came in, Per Mathias, you had finished nearly at the bottom of the league. Häcken had a really bad season. How have you found it this season? What did he change, and what's he done for your game?
He's been great. He's been great. Obviously, you can see the progression from the team. He's clear in his instructions as well, which is the most important thing as a manager. I think he's clear. Everyone knows kind of, no matter if you're going to play, no matter if you're on the bench, it's clear. And obviously, as you can see, we have a good squad as well that push each other. And it's going really well, and he's a very good coach. So he deserves all the flowers at the moment.
And just final question as well, because I do a bit of work in non-league. I watch a lot of non-league football basically. So, what would your advice be to English players in non-league in terms of moving out here? Because sometimes people are a bit maybe hesitant.
Yeah, for sure. I would say trust yourself. I think sometimes you have to come out of your comfort zone to find yourself, and you can. you can go somewhere and not be wanted, or you can go somewhere and be wanted. And sometimes in football, when someone wants you, that's the biggest thing, where you can express yourself, enjoy yourself, have confidence within yourself, you know, and you can bring out the best person you are. And yeah, I think it will help massively.
Yeah, Blair Turgott, thank you so much for talking to us on the Nordic Football Podcast. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so fortunate enough to get an interview with cheeky interview with Blair Turgott there, which was nice as well. Obviously, being an Englishman, a bit like us, Steve, in this covering these leagues, he hopefully, you know, hopefully you could hear it through the Häcken fans going a bit crazy at the end there. They were, you know, it was actually, I think the stadium atmosphere adds to the interview, but I managed to catch him for 5 minutes, and it was really nice to sort of speak to him and get his perspectives on life in Sweden as well. And I think that kind of gives an example, Steve, of the squad. You know, we were just talking about the kind of squad they've built and the players they have. He's another one who's it's a good bit of scouting that they've done, and of course he was part of the team that won the league. You know, in that famous thrashing of IFK Göteborg to confirm the title when they beat them. I think it was 4-0 in their own back garden, and just shows you that, you know, if you take a chance and you move out to Sweden in terms of an English player, he's benefited from it. It's a real shame he'll miss the season, but yeah, it was just what he said kind of just added to the feeling that Häcken are a team on the up. Yeah,
thanks very much to Blair for that one. And I'll just ask you a question now. I was going to ask you this at the end of when we talk about IFK Göteborg soon, but Sean at Seeger_23 asks, after being in Gothenburg, do you feel as though Häcken's stock is rising there, or are they still the little team from Hisingen?
Yeah, great question. I think probably already answered this in the course of the last few minutes, but no, they're definitely not the little team from Hisingen anymore. We're going to talk about IFK in a minute, Steve, so I'm sure you'll ask me to compare the two in terms of the experience and what it was like going to both different games. So I'll save my thoughts for that, but certainly they're not the little team from Hisingen anymore. They're the champions of Sweden at the end of the day. They've taken on everyone in the league and been better than all of them in over the course of the season. I still think this year they'll go close. You know, Malmo, unless Malmo pull out 30 games winning record or something, at some point surely they're gonna stutter at some point, and I think Häcken will be one of the main teams that can take advantage of that. As I just mentioned, I think if they do have a weakness, maybe it's in that forward area. I just think Jeremiev is a big loss, and might that come back to haunt them at some point, because, as I say, for 45 minutes, Djurgården did contain them up front, and I felt that was where they might actually win the game. But when you've got the Gustafsson twins, you've got Rygaard in midfield, and then you've got those forwards up front, the likes of Choro. Don't forget Sadiq was injured, didn't play. Turgott injured, didn't play. Udenas obviously is sort of in and out of the team. Sonko's a young player coming up. They've got a lot of forward options, a lot of pace in those forward areas. The fullbacks are not bad. I think maybe the fullbacks could contribute a little bit more at times, but I think they're very strong, solid over the course of the season. And then, like you said, Steve, about Hovland and players like that, at centre back, Johan Hammer's not playing; he's been injured as well. So, you know, they're missing their main sort of centre back. They've got a really strong spine. So yeah, I think they can't be considered that small team anymore. No, they've got the Gothia Park, they've got the Gothia Cup, the Gothia Park Academy, the money that they bring in from that tournament, the world's biggest youth tournament, basically. The money that sustains them. They've got a really nice academy, which I've been lucky enough to go and visit. And I think they've even got a really good women's team as well. You know, they invest in the women's side of football. So, you know, they've been in the Women's Champions League and things like that as well. So as a club in general, they give me a feeling of a team that's on the up and isn't going anywhere anytime soon, I don't think. Yeah, and Djurgården, I suppose we need to give them a bit of a mention here as well. They have beaten Kalmar tonight at the time of recording, 3-1. A good win for them. 100% record at home, actually, for Djurgården this season. Away from home, it's a different matter. 3 losses and 1 draw. Now, did you see enough in that first half to suggest that they would go on and beat Kalmar tonight? And where are Djurgården at? Because they're up and down like anything, aren't they, right now? Like a yo-yo, really. Don't know which version we're going to see of them, although it does seem there's a massive consistency between home and away performances. Yeah, it's a good question. And anyone who plays Fantasy or Svenskan probably, might listen to what I'm saying here with a bit of interest, because I saw enough in that game to think that Djurgården are going to be okay. But at the same time, you know, that was only for 45 minutes. And I think the thing was, like, with this Kalmar game, for example, Steve, I felt in my mind, is it time to maybe bring in 1 or 2 other diff players for this week's fantasy game? But the question in my mind was that consistency. You know, they could easily just like draw 0-0 to Kalmar. They could easily lose at home to Kalmar. Like I couldn't. You can't hang your hat on Diff at the moment. That's the thing in terms of, you know, like picking a fantasy player. So for me, Joel Osorio was the best player, Djurgården's best player on the day. It doesn't surprise me that he's gone and scored another one tonight as well for against Kalmar. So that's quite an interesting one. But they kind of changed the shape a little bit. I think the big thing with them, Steve, is they haven't found a role for Berg yet. I feel like Berg, such a big player for Kalmar, I just don't think they found a position for him. He started as a kind of a false 9, then he drifted sort of the number 10, then he sort of drifted out wide for a bit. They had Felenius and Vikheim in the wide areas. Then Osorio moved up front. I just feel like they don't really have a position for him yet. You know, he was really good for Kalmar as that false 9. You know, he basically was the whole Kalmar attacking force, really. He could go where he wanted, and he had the freedom to go pretty much run the show for Henrik Rydström's team. And I saw an interesting comment from Rydström actually last week, Steve. He said that Berg would have been better going to Malmo, which is a big statement, obviously. You know, he managed him as well, maybe a bit of mind games. But I just feel like they haven't quite found the place for Berg yet. And Osorio, I don't think that, you know, Osorio was dropped at the beginning of the season because they had a disciplinary issue. I think he didn't react well to not playing, but whether it was he was promised game time and then it was maybe the manager's fault for miscommunicating it, or whether it was Osorio's fault for his reaction, I don't know. He was forced to apologise, so he was left out of the team for the first, I think, 3 games of the season. He started this game and he really looked sharp. He scored a really good goal. I thought the centre-backs did well. I thought Danielsson and Lofgren looked really solid. I think the thing with the Häcken game, I felt that the fullbacks were too high. They left 2v2 too many times at the back, and I thought that they could get caught on a counter-attack. You know, they have Elias Andersson and they have, I can't remember his name, Piotr Johansson as a right-back. And I just felt like, but there's no like balance. Both of them go flying up the pitch at times. Johansson was popping up in his penalty area at certain points. And you know, last thing you want to do against Häcken is leave yourself to that counter-attack, which I think cost them in the second half. But I saw enough from Diff to suggest that they're not going to be terrible this year. You know, if we compare them to IFK, for example, who are in the relegation zone tonight as we speak. There's still one more game to be played, but you know, they're in the relegation zone. Hammarby are not having a good team either. There was a question about Stockholm teams from history in Russia, I think, and I've seen enough to maybe think Diff won't be as bad as them too. I saw tonight they played Edvardsen. Obviously, Edvardsen was left out of the Häcken game, and he came out afterwards and said he doesn't like not playing. And they do have a lot of forward options there that they're going to have to juggle. In terms of the midfielder, Eriksson and Findell, I just felt like Häcken had a better midfield. I just felt like they're more dynamic. They're more like they're better. They're just better midfielders. Gustafsson's assist for Lars Olden Larsson's second goal was just superb. He just runs through the midfield. It reminded me of, I'm trying to think of who could, you know, someone like Seth Fabregas or someone like that. It was really just, Gustafsson was exceptional, and I just feel like he's a slight level above the likes of Eriksson and Findell. And I think that was a deciding factor, but I'd probably put Djurgården around, you know, top 5 this season, definitely. I think they will at some point go on a bit of a run. And then from there, it's just a case of how far can they go and can they get the balance.
Well,
but I think
very strong.
I think with Diff, just one final point. I think with Diff, I think there will be some transfers in the summer. I think they're going to have to get rid of some players maybe because the squad is quite big.
They've got a problem for me in those forward areas. They don't really seem to know what their best front 3 is, perhaps. Edvardsen, he came on for 15 minutes there in your game. Did he impress you much? Did he look hungry? I mean, it was 2-1. They were well in the game when he came on, but within, 5 or 6 minutes, it was game over. So, Osorio at the moment seems to be more of the form guy. They really haven't got enough out of some. I mean, Felenius, another player who kind of flatters to deceive, doesn't he? So that seems to be the problem area for Diff, just to get that attack firing fully, consistency.
Yeah, and one of the things about being in the media centre sometimes, Stevie, you get a cheeky little look at the scouts and stuff and who's there, and your guests. And I noticed, I think there was I won't name them, but there was a German Bundesliga club in the crowd somewhere. And interestingly enough, our man Bergvall came on, who there's a lot of talk about him at the moment. If you want more, maybe go and listen to the Patreon. If you're a subscriber on Patreon, I'm sure you'll have already clocked Bergvall in our I tend to watch. I may as well just drop it there. There's no point.
Which one was about? Was it the like rabbits, aren't they? The Bergvall.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. But yeah, no, Lucas Bergvall came on in the second half, and actually, Steve, I thought he looked really like. I was lucky enough to see 3 players, and I tend to watch during the course of my trip, and all 3 of them backed up my feelings. Like, obviously, first time I've seen any of the 3 of them live, all 3 of them backed up my feelings. I won't name 2 of them, so go on patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. Go and grab them if you want. But Bergvall, when he came on, Steve, I thought there was one move in the second half when he came on where he turned. I can't remember who it was. He turned the midfielder, but he really used his body well, his balance and his strength. And I was thinking to myself, for a 17, 18-year-old, the strength that he had actually, upper body strength, I was quite surprised about. In that one move, I saw enough to think like, yeah, he's not just good on the ball technically, but he's actually got a little bit about him in terms of physicality. Surprisingly good strength to turn the man. He looked really promising to me. I think it won't be long before he gets more game time. And I think with Diff, that's how I feel about him. I think there's a few players coming to the end of the line there. And I think there's a few players coming up that could maybe by the end of the season. I think their team might look quite different if you compare it from the first day to the last day. And I think Bergvall's one of them, Steve. I thought he was really good when he came off. But when it was, it was quite late in the game at that point, and he couldn't really have much of an influence. Came on and played in midfield. But when you say about Edvardsen, Steve, I think I would love to have got an interview with him because he does like to talk. But I think there is a few people. I think I've heard whispers about maybe is Diff going to be the place for him long term? Like, is he actually matching the expectations? And we're going to talk about Degerfors in a minute, which is obviously where he came from and had such an amazing season. But I think there's a few question marks about Edvardsen, to be honest, at this moment in time.
Yeah, so that was it. Häcken 4, Djurgården 1. The next night, you were in attendance again. This match was IFK Göteborg against Degerfors. A crisis hit IFK, who had 1 point on the board heading into that game, only scored 1 goal. But they go and bashed Degerfors 6-0 in this fixture. Quite a remarkable scoreline, actually. Yeah, I mean, we move on to this one, Jonathan. What are your overall takes about this particular fixture?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say is that despite the fact that when I think we turned up at the stadium, they were near the relegation zone or in the relegation zone, that my overriding feeling from that game is they are a massive club. Like, there's no 2 ways about it. Like, I don't like to compare them to Häcken because I think it's unfair, but you had a palpable sense, like, going to the stadium, like, this is a football club, you know what I mean? This is a proper club. Häcken are the same, but they're in their own way. They're sort of like, they're kind of like, they're kind of almost like hipster, you know what I mean? They're the cool club across the town, who are sort of nice and good, and they've got their nice bars with their nice fish and chips, if you know what I mean. So I think they're both big in their own way, if that makes sense. I'm not knocking Häcken, but with IFK, it was like, they're just a much bigger club in terms of the size of the organization and the kind of buzz around the town. I felt, there was fans, obviously Degerfors fans in the city drinking before the match, and I was walking around the town, and then there's loads of IFK sort of scarves and flags and everything around the town, and people made their way to the game. It's just when you approach the stadium, there's this, obviously the attendance for Häcken was 5,000, I think 5,100 and something. The attendance for the IFK match was, I think, 13,000, or roughly between 13 and 14,000. So, there you go. It's almost triple the amount of people there straight away. And yeah, you just walk in and it's like, they are quite a classy club, I think, in a way. Like they're a sleeping giant, really, in terms of, everyone knows the history. They're a massive club historically. They've won titles. They've been, where would you rank them in terms of the biggest clubs in Sweden? I'm not sure. Malmo AIK fans, a few others would have Djurgården fans. Everyone will have their debate, but in terms of historic success, they're one of the top 3, IFK, and you feel that kind of feeling. But at the end of the day, they've been, for want of a better word, not run the best over the last 5 years. Let's be honest. I think they're trying to turn that around now. I was lucky enough to sort of speak to the scout, one of their main scouts. I was lucky enough to speak to someone I met, funnily enough, Steve, who runs the club now, is one of the directors of the club, who I met in Gothenburg before he was actually working there, and saw him again this time. So it was really nice to bump into him, and we had a good chat. So I do know some people at the club, if that makes sense. And yeah, I felt really nice being back. Actually, it was really enjoyable. The anthem, Steve. Obviously, I know you've got your own sort of secret allegiances to them. Maybe potentially, I see a smile on your face even as I say that now. And there's no doubt about it when the anthem comes on and the fans come out. I haven't actually tweeted it. Maybe I'll put it on YouTube or something. But yeah, it's definitely a kind of like goosebumps feeling. Like the anthem is. You've got to see it and experience it. I think it's breathtaking, to be honest. The choreography as well, how they walk out to the anthem and stuff like that. It's I guess it's what some people who sort of like teams like Celtic and etc. feel when You'll Never Walk Alone comes on, which I have never quite taken to myself. But that anthem feeling, of kind of like community. Everyone's got their flags up. It was really you feel like this is big. Wasn't full stadium, don't get me wrong, but it was close to full, I think, or at least 3/4 maybe. On the pitch, obviously, before going to that game, Steve, of course, scored 1 goal in 6 games, I think, or 1 goal in 5 games. Sorry, and they've scored 1 goal they've scored one goal in 7 in total before that game, and in that one game, they somehow managed to put 6 past Degerfors. Complete domination.
We'll come to the match. We will come to the match in a minute, but yeah, I mean. It's interesting that I'm picturing this. Imagine if IFK were actually in a title race one year, and imagine this anthem and the crowd. I mean, it would be tenfold, wouldn't it? The spiciness and the electricity, and you're right. I mean, I remember that evening, you messaged me and said, IFK are an absolutely massive club, mate. They're the biggest in Sweden. I mean.
I'm not sure if I said that.
Well, I think it was along those lines. But
the first bit I said, I'm not sure.
I'll have to reread it, but it was along those lines. But you're absolutely right. It's a massive club, and who are in difficult times. They're obviously at the minute under the shadow of Häcken in terms of on the field. It's a little bit similar to what sort of Tromsø are like with Bodø Glimt in Norway. A bit apart from that, IFK obviously a far more bigger size. But 6-0 win. I mean, I actually watched this game as well, and it was a good watch. Actually, I thought Degerfors' style contributed to the game. Degerfors probably should have scored a goal or two, I thought, but I mean, 6 are the best from Gothenburg here. It was, who didn't score? Everyone seemed to get on the score sheet or get an assist. I think Marcus Berg got himself a couple of goals, but mostly stuff was shared around. They were right on the front foot early doors, and they got the crowd on side immediately.
Yeah, they came out of the blocks flying. As you said, I mean, I definitely text you saying this is a big club, and I stand by that. They're a massive club. If I was, sometimes I think if I was a footballer, what would my career journey be like? Like football managers, where would you be telling your agents to get you? I would definitely sign up for it. I can see why, like Marek Hamzik or trying to think other players who have gone there, have taken the choice to go there, because don't get me wrong, Stockholm clubs are big as well. So that I think playing in Sweden is actually underrated. I think, especially for maybe African players or players who are at the beginning of their careers or players coming to the end of their careers, I think it's an underrated league, because even Häcken, the noise the fans make, and the sort of the drums and the atmosphere, the choreography, the flares and stuff, even at Häcken, which is just 5,000 fans, it's underrated. And IFK is the same. Playing in front of like 14,000, 15,000 really passionate fans, I'd definitely sign up for a year or two of it. Historically, they're a massive club. As I said, I had a good chat with the chairman, Richard Berkling, and was talking to him about what's been going on in the past. And I think they are trying to turn things around. The joint managers, I did ask him, is there kind of off the record, is he able to say who's going to be the next manager? He gave me a little cheeky smile, and he just said the manager's doing well. But actually, Steve, to be fair, I'm going to praise the managers now. William Lundin and Alexander Tenger, the assistant caretakers, because one thing that obviously had a scouts ticket. I was right bang on the centre circle, pretty much, brilliant seats. One thing I noticed during the game is that the play, and I know we've got an interview coming up with Emil Salomonsson, who the right back for IFK, who got 2 assists on the day. So you'll listen to that any second now. But one thing I noticed, Steve, is that the players kept running up to the managers and the coaches, and they kept giving them instructions after like every couple of 5 minutes or so. You know, a bit like Arteta does with Arsenal. He has a cheeky sort of Ramsdale goes down injured, you know, pretending Ramsdale's injured every 5 minutes, isn't he, with Arsenal? And then they have a little sort of team talk. It was a similar thing. The senior players in that team were constantly communicating with the two joint managers. And I actually had a lot of, I felt like they gave them tactical, and I asked Emil this, we'll hear it in a minute, but, you know, did he give them, what kind of tactical instructions was he giving them? Because they changed their tactics after about 5-10 minutes based on I think the feedback of what the manager told them. And I don't know if it was, what interested me about it, Steve, was actually, it looked like it was a kind of collaborative conversation. I felt as if the senior players were also telling the managers, we should do this. You know what I mean? And I've never seen that before, really. You know, usually it's managers just dictating what to do. But there was a few little times where I saw, like, for example, Oscar Wendt, or I saw maybe Olsen going to them and saying, this, and this. Keep that in mind. You know what I mean? As if to say, you know, the senior players actually taking responsibility for what's happening on the pitch and saying, this is what I'm seeing, maybe we should change it. Because Degerfors, Steve, their tactics, obviously they play that 3-4-3 system. They play the left side of centre-back Mama, and they play the right full-back Buzayin. And basically both of them just ping cross-field passes from right to left over the shoulder. Both all day long. Mama Chuch, to be fair to him, he's got a left foot on him. He can ping a pass. He pings like 70-yard left-footed passes. And I think Oscar Wendt, who's the left-back at IFK, went to the touchline and said, listen, they're trying to put one over my head. Do you know what I mean? And let's try and find a way around that. The space was in the midfield because Degerfors just left too much space in midfield. I thought that Carlin, I think he was played in Norway as well, didn't he, Steve? I thought he was the best player on the pitch. You know, this showing my tendency for a midfielder, but I thought Carlin ran the show in midfield. I thought he was brave. I thought he was strong. I really liked him, actually. They've obviously got Hagen as well, who was at Buda Glimt. He got on the score sheet, but it was really interesting watching the tactical battle, actually, from that point of view. And I think they just tactically outthought Degerfors. They couldn't get a grip in the midfield. Degerfors, the crossfield balls just stopped working after a few minutes. Once they had that advantage as well, IFK went crazy, really, didn't they, with the amount of goals they scored. We were listening to goal music every couple of minutes. Berg got 2, Wendt got 1, Olsen got 1, Hagen got 1, and Svensson got 1. Svensson actually opened the scoring with a header from a corner. He played centre back, which is I think it's quite rare for him to do that. So an absolute battering. Obviously, they've only scored 7 all season, and I was there to see 6 of them, so that was fantastic. Yeah,
Degerfors getting hit for 6, and you're right what you say. Higher Blåvitt was literally on repeat, wasn't it, with the goal music? You mentioned the Emil Salomonsson there. You managed to get a chat with him after the game. Might as well bring it onto the podcast now. But yeah, you managed to get into that media zone, and he gave us some thoughts after this brilliant win for IFK.
And I'm with Emil Salomonsson after the 6-0 win between IFK Göteborg and Degerfors. Emil, what an amazing game today for you guys.
Yeah, it was a very, very good game, and we've been waiting for this moment to win with a lot of goals at home and to have a good feeling after the game. So it's a great night for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's your first win of the season, and we've seen a few of your games this year. It's been a bit tough, like the Norrköping game. Obviously, you got a draw there, and not the best of seasons so far from your start. But do you feel like today is a lot of positivity to take for the rest of the season now? Like, what changed? What do you feel changed between those games and this game?
I totally agree. I think, especially the first 4 games, we had a tough break, but against Norrköping we could feel that we were on the right way. And today, to score 6 goals and keep the clean sheet, and to give, especially the way we attack this game with courage, and it's difficult. If you look at the standings, everyone knows we're dead last, and it's a hard game to go out and play. But we show courage and we attack, and I think that's the most important thing, and that makes me happy.
How do you feel about the management team here? Because obviously there's been a lot of changes in the last couple of months, and the new management team, I saw like a lot of the times they were given instructions, players will come in to speak to them and getting instructions. Like, do you feel like in your role, for example, your position and your role have changed since the changes recently with the
the new coaches are very good to give instructions during the game, and my role has been a little bit more offensive, and the way I love to play is offensively, and I like to come around on the side with my right foot, and for me it suits me very well, and the style of football I want to play, it suits me very well. So
yeah, maybe like, because we have a lot of people in England play Allsvenskan fantasy, so maybe we should start putting you in a fantasy team as well.
Yeah, today I think 2 assists and a clean sheet would be a good.
Maybe we should have captained you.
Yeah, maybe, maybe. No, but I'm happy. I'm very happy for the team, and it was a good night with with a lot of supporters that go home to the house happy.
Yeah, I mean, IFK is a massive club, and I just want to ask you, kind of, in terms of the management instructions, like, what were they saying, particularly in game, like to you guys? Was it sort of tactical, like specific tactical things? Like, what were they kind of giving, or were they just giving you encourable, if you know what I mean? Just interested to know a bit more about how they work.
Today when we play against when they play 5-3-2, we try to double on the side because they only have one wing back, so we want to come high with our winger and our fullbacks. So it's difficult for their wing back, and I think they're very successful there.
Yeah.
And also we want to press high, and you can see in the start of the game we win the ball many times, and that's the kind of style we want to come out aggressively and then keep the ball and attack on the sides. And that was a very good way to attack the game.
I thought it was amazing. And just one final question before I let you go. Thank you so much. If you had a IFK five-a-side team, like, who would be in your five-a-side team? Because I thought, for example, today Carlin was really good in the midfield. But just a bit of fun. Like, if you were having an IFK five-a-side, who would you be picking?
Five-a-side, okay. I will have the goalkeeper Pontus. And then five-a-side. Then you play 2-2 or maybe 1-2. Okay, I would put Carlin on the back as a sweeper. He's very good there. Then I put myself, of course.
Yeah, of course.
And then I put Marcus on top, and then I put on the left. Sebastian Olsson was great today, so I put him on the left. So I think that's a good five-a-side team.
Fantastic, and thank you so much for your time and talking to the Nordic Football Podcast.
Thank you, no worries.
Yeah, that was Emil Salomonsson. Hopefully I got the pronunciation right. He was really generous with his time. Funnily enough, Steve, I wasn't actually in the media zone, and there's a funny story. They wouldn't actually let me interview anyone. And I have to thank someone called Elizzabeth, who works at IFK, for getting that opportunity, because they essentially told me, Steve, that we don't have the rights to interview anyone. So I wasn't actually allowed to go to the mix zone. I wanted to get an interview maybe with Berg or someone, but they stopped and said, sorry, you don't. It's a lot more regimented, IFK, obviously.
Right. So
you can't go to the press conference. You can't go into the mix zone because you don't have the badge or whatever you need. And it was only thanks to Elizzabeth that we were able to talk to Emil, and obviously Emil being so gracious with his time. But I think it was something to do with the Allsvenskan rights. So I said, maybe we should take the Allsvenskan rights for England, because no one else has them, do they, Steve? So, but as he mentioned there, obviously the tactical bit about, he said he's got license now to go a bit more attacking. Salomonsson, he said, in his new role, obviously compared to Mika Stara. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, I tweeted cheekily tonight the rumours about Alan Pardew. It's been reported tonight that Alan Pardew maybe was in the running for the IFK Göteborg job, which would be, well, imagine that, Steve. That would be that'd be interesting to say the least. But I wonder if they might just hang on to the two joint managers they got at the moment. Because I get the feeling they got a lot of respect in the dressing room. I did ask the chairman, Richard Berkling, is Stefan Billborn going to be the man? And he kind of looked at me and said, well, they're happy. He's happy in Norway. With a sort of cheeky look. So I'm not sure about that. Obviously, that's off the record conversation. Apart from what he just told me there, which is, he didn't really say anything really there. But I do wonder if these two joint managers will get a little bit more time, because I feel like maybe as coaches they are quite proactive and quite decent. So watch this space. They've not had a good start to the season. There's a lot of things to go there, but with the sacking of Stara so close to the season, they haven't really had much time, have they, to implement their ideas. So maybe they'll improve as the season goes on.
Yeah, I think it's time we knock this Alan Pardew rumour report on the head, because most of the questions that were asked to us this week are about Pardew. Several people wondering what the hell's going on with this Alan Pardew link. And I mean, it rather shocked me when I saw this. Quite a lot of negative reaction about it, but am I just being a bit old-fashioned here? I actually think he wouldn't be a bad coup for them. Alan Pardew, he's very experienced. He's not. You can do a lot worse than Pardew. I'm sure you can do better as well. But hey, I mean, at least you're going to get someone who can dance well, right, on the sidelines. But yeah, what is going on here? What is this report, Jonathan? So we can quash this now.
Yeah, well, I mean, the report came out that he's basically been linked. I think the report on Football Scalana, who obviously, Steve, I do some work for, so I can't knock them too much in that sense, but obviously they're very well sourced, so and a highly professional organization. And it came out this evening, basically, that where it was saying let me just get the quotes. Pretty much, I think I don't know if it was actually even really just rumors, but they have a sort of silly season blog, and it basically said on it that let me just read. Expressen reported that IFK was offered Pardew as a manager. So basically, someone touting Alan Pardew to go to IFK. He's one of several coaches apparently that Blavet has been offered, and IFK has not given any information on the coaching issue, as the club is said to want its new organisation and strategy before a new coach joins. Obviously, they've only just brought in a new technical director, Steve, in the last 10 days, Ola Larsson. I think he might have been at the stadium, but I didn't get to speak to him or anything like that. But Pardew has said that he is open to coaching a club in Sweden, as his wife's hometown is in Västerås, which I was going to say, I believe he has a Swedish wife, and that's correct. He said, Allsvenskan has grown enormously in recent years. This is Alan Pardew. Allsvenskan has grown enormously in recent years. Everyone involved has done a fantastic job there. Pat yourself on the back there, Steve. He might even be talking about you and me. But everyone involved has done a fantastic job there. Djurgården, Malmö, and IFK are the clubs I most associate in my mind as the big clubs. So who knows, said Pardew to Expressen. So those are direct quotes from the man himself. His last coaching role was in Greece and Bulgaria. So he has done the sort of European roles. He was at Aris and CSKA, I believe. So maybe we will see him in Sweden at some certain point.
Okay, so IFK then going ahead with them, 6-0 win. You know, it sounds like you're more optimistic about them than perhaps you would have been a few weeks ago after seeing them in the flesh.
Slightly, yeah. I think that, well, I mean, you've got to be a bit more enthused when you watch a 6-0 win, don't you, at the end of the day? Yeah. But I saw enough to think that they'll be okay. Obviously, they've drawn tonight against Bromma Poikina away 0-0. So maybe the defence is starting to be a little bit more improved. I think they need a striker. I think Berg is quality on his day, but he is unfortunately coming to the end of his time. I think Carlin really looked good to me. I think the senior members of the squad like Salomonsson and that can still do a job just based on what I saw. But I do think that they lack a little bit of pace. I think that compared to Häcken, you know, that Gothenburg derby is in a few weeks' time. Actually, it's going to be interesting. But they don't have that dynamism. I think that Häcken have. They don't have the ability to play in different systems and shapes, which Per Mertesacker has implemented at IFK. I think it's still a long-term project for IFK. Obviously, they've got the new technical director now. Now they're probably going to need a new head coach. I think it's going to take a couple of years before we see IFK maybe back to anywhere kind of top 3 or 4 positions. But yeah, let's not forget Degerfors were awful, to be honest. You know, they basically fell apart at a certain point. So I think watch this space for the IFK. I think this season probably be around mid-table 7th, 8th.
Yeah, they have. That defense has got a bit better recently for IFK. Just 2 goals now conceded in the last 4 consecutive clean sheets. That 0-0 against Bromma Poikina, I don't think that's a bad result right now. Bromma Poikina are actually playing some good football. So, what's brought about this improved defense, do you think?
Well, it was interesting they put Gustav Svensson in as a centre-back. He's a midfielder, in my opinion. I think a lot of his career anyway. They put him as centre-back for that game. I don't know if he played centre-back tonight against Bromma Poikina. But one player I do need to talk about, Steve, before we move on and wrap up this section or whatever. But I think, of course, without wanting to reveal too much of what I tend to watch, shall I tell the people, Steve?
Well, I'll tell you what, there's more revelations here than I'm trying to think. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, these players at the end of the day are on the list for a reason, and it's going to be impossible not to avoid talking about them.
Well, if you have listened to it on Patreon, then you know you've already heard me talk about it. If you've not listened to it on Patreon, then go to patreon.com and listen to it. But I can't finish this section without talking about Johan Bangsbo. I was keeping a very close eye on him as one who I tend to watch. And I thought he was really good. I saw enough tools there to suggest that he is a worthy tend to watch inclusion this year, Steve. You asked me on the show, on the previous show, what kind of player is he similar to? And I said Sami Hyypiä, didn't I? And yeah, he's decent on the ball. There's 1 or 2 times maybe where he was a little bit like you did worry about him on the press. You know, early in the game they did try and press him. Bangsbo, and there's 1 or 2 times where there was one move where he pulled a lovely little drag back, but there was one time he nearly got caught, and it would have been awkward for him. Maybe in a bigger league, he might be pressed a bit more. but he's got a strong frame, good left-sided centre-back, a strong player. I thought he was really solid on the day, and he calm on the ball, and he's very keen to engage 1v1 physically as well. He's not scared of that physical battle. And, as a young player in Allsvenskan, I was actually sat next to a Dutch Eredivisie scout. So I'm not going to name the club, but you know what it's like, Steve, in these leagues. There's always people watching, and I'm pretty sure, I didn't see what he's writing down in his notebook, but I've got a feeling he was looking at Bangsberg quite intently. I thought Bangsberg was very good on the day, and as a young player, I think he's got a very bright future. It was a real shame that Carneal was injured. I would have loved to have seen Hussein Carneal play, but Johan Bangsberg is definitely one for the scouts notebook.
Was it one of the big three clubs in that from the Eredivisie?
No comment.
Ooh, right. That's intriguing, isn't it? Obviously, a man that is being closely watched. I'm sure there are a few Belgian scouts in attendance as well, no doubt.
Maybe he saw our 10 to watch, Stephen, and got himself on the first plane. You never know. We've got 20 great players on that Patreon.
Now, before we finish this section, last year, one of the biggest rants of the season on the NFP was your scathing attack on Degerfors. And they're at it again this year. I mean, defensively, they have by far the worst record out of any team. 17 goals conceded. Even if they had only lost that match 1-0, they would still have the second worst defence in the league. Now, it was almost poetic, really, that you were there to see them getting absolutely annihilated, because I mean, incredibly, they're outside the relegation zone right now, but they just concede. They're like the Leeds of Allsvenskan. They just can't stop conceding goals. Jonathan, I mean, what do you make of them? And is this the year when this is eventually just going to bite them too much?
Well, you use a great word there, poetic. And do you want to know something even more poetic, Steve?
Yeah,
they've lost 6-0 on match day 6 against the IFK Göteborg.
Yeah.
And do you remember when they lost 6-0 last against Elfsborg?
Match day, I don't know. It was
match day 6 last
as
season.
Well. Right.
So every match day 6 of the last 2 seasons, they've conceded 6. I don't know what it is about match day 6, but whoever they play in the 6th match next season, wherever they are, if they're still in the league anyway, it will be guaranteed 6-0. And that was what prompted my rant. So it's literally a year ago when I had that rant about Degerfors against Elfsborg when they lost 6-0. They weren't. I didn't think they were horrendous. In fairness, like it wasn't as bad as the Elfsborg game last season when I went on that rant. If you go back a year ago on the podcast, but it was pretty shocking, to be honest. I just think that tactically, Steve, they got it all wrong. And I think the way they play, they're just going to take a few beatings. Like I just think the way they like midfield's just way too open. If you fill the midfield with if you play a midfield 3 against them, we did it once, didn't we, Steve? We did a podcast where we literally looked at every tactic: 3-4-3 versus 4-4-2, etc., etc. Yeah. My feeling with Degerfors is if you play a tight midfield against them, the 2 midfielders there's way too much space in that midfield because they play a 3-5-2, but the 2 forwards don't really get back much. The wide players either push way too high or they're pinging crossfield balls over the top. And what it does is it leaves the 2 central midfielders come out to the wide areas to sort of link with them, and they just leave big chasms in midfield. And like I said, Carlin took advantage of that, and he was for me the best player on the pitch that day. I think he got 1 assist, and he for me he ran the show. Even in terms of breaking play up and that kind of thing, getting in people's faces and breaking the play, I thought it was really impressive. But I'm not sure about Degerfors, Steve. Will they? Adam Carlin, by the way, that his name is. He picked up 7 points in fantasy on that occasion. He got a couple of bonus points. I'm not sure if Degerfors will go down this season. I think I can't remember where I had them in my preseason. I had them in the bottom 4, I think. I'm not going to change my opinion on that. I mean, they are 12th at the moment. They have got an ability to win. They beat Djurgården, of course. They've only scored 7 goals. They've got a decent striker in Vukojevic. He's not bad. Campos isn't bad. They brought on a really exciting young player, I thought, in the second half, who I'm going to keep an eye on. I think he's 17-year-old named Ilunga. I thought he came on and had decent energy about him. But I just think tactically, Steve, they're going to take some beatings because of the I don't think the centre backs are great, and I think the style they try and play is if you can nullify it, those, like I say, those crossfield balls over the top, they're going to have to find a plan B, because once that gets found out, which EF found out in about 10 minutes, it was all over from there, and they're not very good defending set pieces either.
Right, we'll finish off with this Swedish section now. Just one question I do want to touch on, because I think it was asked last time and we didn't have a chance to go over it. It is a question from Flying Dutchman. Is Taha Ali going to have a huge say at Malmo, in your opinion? Malmo, of course, 100% record. We'll probably talk about more of them in the next show. But Taha Ali, I know you mentioned him a couple of weeks ago, starting to catch your eye, and he's growing from strength to strength, right?
Well, the question is going to be, can he get in the team? I mean, it's a great question. Thank you. Janus Stan, I think, loyal supporter of the podcast. He asks a lot of good questions. I think Taha Ali is a brilliant player. I liked him at Helsingborg. I think he's worth the money that Malmo have paid. I think he's under the right manager. I think Rydström is going to be the man to develop him as well into a better player. I think he, like I said, I think I've said it in the past, I think he's a little bit lightweight, but I think he can physically develop at Malmo now. I think he's about 23, 24. Scored a brilliant goal a couple of weeks back. But the thing is, he's playing off the bench, Steve. You've got Nanasi, you've got Vecchia. They've got really... We talked about Malmo last week, so we're not going to go into them too much this week, but they've won again, beaten AIK 3-1, went 1-0 down and came back. 7 out of 7 wins. They just look frightening at the moment, actually, for Svenskan level, considering they haven't even really got going yet. I'm not sure how many games Ali's going to start. That's the only thing. I think he can go on. As I've said, I think he's one of the top 5 1v1 dribblers on Svenskan probably, and it's just a case of, has he got his all-round game maybe enough to get out players like Vecchia from the team. Nanasi, obviously, against Varberg boys, I think he scored a hat-trick, did he? Or at least 2 goals and 2 assists, something like that. He was on fire that day. And in general, they just got really good players in those wide areas and forward areas. So, the short answer to your question is, yes, he's going to have a huge say, but is it going to be huger than Vecchia, Nanasi, Christiansen, Larsson? I'm not sure. Rydström will rotate a lot, and Rydström actually came out this week and said one of the toughest things in his new Malmo job is having to leave players out. Who does he? And I think he needs that experience if he's going to go on and have a big career, because that's part of the job as a big club. You've got to tell these players that they're not playing, and they're going to be angry, and they've got big egos and big entourages, and that's going to be a challenge for him. So I think he's learning that now, really, because it's really hard for it. He dropped Kiese Tellin last week. He dropped Christiansen from the team against Varberg. So he's trying to rotate everything, and that's going to be a challenge for him. But Taha Ali is a very, very good player. Yeah, I like him.
Lewis Kelly asks, what is the best way to watch each league at LGK101? I've said before, for Eliteserien, FIFA Plus app or on their website is very good for Eliteserien at the minute. Awesome bookmakers website. Unfortunately, our Svenskan games are not on FIFA Plus. Jonathan, I don't know if you have any other suggestions where you can watch Allsvenskan football outside of Sweden or not.
Yeah, well, the rights are owned, I'm pretty sure, by Discovery Plus. I've got a feeling if you go and look on Amazon Prime, I think you can actually find Discovery. I think you can buy games packages. If you don't want to do that, which I don't understand why they don't just put them on Discovery Plus, to be honest, in England, because why not? You've got nothing to lose. If you can't find it on there, then obviously if you're 18 plus, betting sites, Betfair show a lot of the games. So that's probably your best bet, to be honest. If not, try Discovery. Those are probably the 2 best ways. But yeah, someone like, Discovery owned by Eurosport owned Discovery. So I feel like someone there needs to make it available in England, because I don't see why not. But yeah, those are the 2 options. I think that's probably it for part 1.
Yeah, that's it. We're going to move on to a bit of a Eliteserien talk to finish off the episode.
Yeah, quite a long section, but of course this is the Gothenburg episode. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that and got a good flavour, especially from the 2 interviews and the trip. I definitely will hopefully be back soon. But I guess someone did ask me, when are you coming to Malmo? So I think that's maybe, it's either got to be Malmo or Småland. Obviously, we were asked about Kalmar, and we've also been asked about Stockholm. So listen, anyone anyone who wants to invite me out there or find me an apartment out there, then I'm more than open, because it's a great country.
I'm glad you had a great time out there, Jonathan.
Yeah, coming up in part 2, we'll dip into Norway a little bit. Meatman Soccer has been off on Meatman Soccer's been off on a long walk this weekend, so we'll see how much we talk about. But we can certainly touch on fantasy and a little bit extra. So stay tuned for a short section in part 2. Welcome to part 2 of the Nordic Football Podcast, and we are over to Norway now for a brief section. We are going to take listener questions, and we are also going to look at fantasy a little bit. So, Mr. Meatman, I mean, if you just want to tell the listeners what you're up to this weekend, I believe you went for a nice long walk.
Well, it's one of those episodes where I've not got as much to say as normal because, I was out in the hills this is where I'm doing my bit for the Yorkshire Tourism Board, by the way. I was out there in the Yorkshire Dale. I was in glorious Nidderdale, and I was on a 16-kilometer hike in the hills. It was just too nice of a day to turn down after we've had terrible weather here over the last couple of months. So I had to get out there. The downside of that is I didn't see any of the games at all on Sunday in Elizzabeth. So normally I'll be well prepared, well equipped. I've got I've got all my screens in operation, watching 4 games at once or whatever. But on this occasion, I was literally restricted to Brann against Sandefjord, Rosenborg Vålerenga, and the second half of Lillestrøm Glimt. So yeah, not as clued up as quite as normal, Jonathan.
Not as clued up as normal, but that's no problem at all because your general knowledge is exceptional. Of course, that's why you are the man on this podcast. So what we're going to do is going to go into listener questions straight away and put you to the test, my friend. We've also got maybe 1 or 2 little fancy tidbits, but let's see how we get on. So as always, at Twitter at Nordic Football, thank you so much for all the questions. We had loads again this week. Steve, I'm going to just run through them in order, basically. So at Showtime Berisha, Mr. Berisha Show, he says, where can RBK improve? And please say something nice about Veton Berisha because it's been a tough start with a smiley face. That also ties in with another question, which we had from Matteo Bocci, I believe. How long before RBK changes head coach? Now, just to give the background on that, obviously, Rosenborg 1, Vålerenga 3 was the weekend's result. Home defeat for Rosenborg. The previous week was odd 0, Rosenborg 0, and Rosenborg 0, Brann 2 in the double game week. So not a good run of form for Rosenborg, Steve. They are not doing too well in the league. What is your answer to those 2 questions?
Well, I think I tweeted something from our personal account on Saturday when I was watching them against Vålerenga, and I can't remember the exact words, but it was something like, that Rosenborg are such a poor watch these days. Not very exciting. Their brand of football is not getting anyone on the edge of the seats. I mean, I'm looking at the results now. I don't think they've played well in any game this year. You could argue the 1-1 draw against Molde away, they were not too bad. But overall, there's been some really poor football on show. And I think it's starting to come now. The frustrations are there for the fans. They lost at home against Brann, a big rival at home. And I think that was a little bit embarrassing because it was clear Brann are in a completely different dimension right now, playing far better football, more confident. The club feels in a better way. And then another loss at home to another rival, Vålerenga, 3-1. And they've got issues. What can they do to improve? It kind of ties in with the other question about how long are they going to keep Cecil Rekdal as manager. I'm not sure it's going to be for much longer because I said, haven't I? Although you got to respect the job he did last year, I still think that they need a more modern, forward-thinking coach who is going to get them playing an exciting brand of football. They've got to get bums back on the seats. Their fans must be dreading games because it's okay if you're losing games of football, but if you're actually getting entertained and you're enjoying the style and the brand, at least there's some consolation. But at the moment, they're offering very little offensively. There's a real negative feeling around Rosenborg. It's nearly as bad as the Horneland days when Arik Horneland was struggling at the club.
Yeah, and it's not going too well for them in the league, is it, at the moment? They are currently 12th, according to Soccer Stats table. I think that is up to date. and that's only 1 point above second, the relegation trapdoor. So not really a good start for them. They're already 10 points behind Bodø Glimt, who are top. And obviously Brann, 5 points ahead of them as well in second. So they're not really doing well. 1 win in those 6 games. You said there that you think that maybe they need to change the style of play as well a little bit. We've also got one other comment, which was from, where was it? We had one other comment basically saying from Jay Sankris, if you haven't already talked about Rosenborg's start of the league, go ahead. So we've crossed that box. Steve, the next game is against Bodø Glimt away. So good luck with that one. I mean, do you think that if they were to take a heavy beating this weekend, that could be it for the manager?
Yeah, it could be. I don't think you can almost judge yourself. I don't think he can be judged on that match as much. In fact, Rekdal actually got a good record against Bodø Glimt last season. They beat them. But if they then lost against Haugesund at home, then I think they've got some serious problems. So I think that could be the game. I think Rosenborg have not just got to win that game. They've got to get, a good performance in that game against Haugesund as well. Let's see how they do against Glimt. Maybe they can nick a draw, build on that by beating Haugesund. But results have got to improve. Performances have got to improve. The dynamics got to improve. He's got to be more attack-minded. And I was hearing his excuses in pre-season saying, "Oh, we haven't gelled together offensively yet." Well, make it your priority now. There's enough ability in this Rosenborg squad in the final third. He needs to perhaps unleash a few things, Rekdal, and let them get to work.
Yeah, goals from Ofkir, Jatta, and also who was the other one? Bjordal. So Bjordal goal and assist, actually Jatta goal and assist. So if you had some Vålerenga players in your fantasy team this week, you would have done quite well. Just give a shout out to Molly's heroes, Luke Treacy, who is now number 1 in the Nordic Football Podcast Eliteserien Fantasy League. He's leapfrogged a couple of people, including FK Hibbo, Sean Jackson, by 1 point to go to the top of the table. He's had a good week there with 50 points, but it wasn't the highest of scoring weeks, I don't think, in general. Let's move on, because we don't have too much time left. We had a detailed Norwegian show last week. If you haven't listened to it, go back on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast, and we did have a good talk about a lot of the teams in Norway. So this week it's a Sweden week, but a bit more Sweden coverage. Quite an interesting question here from Johannes Kasta, at Johannes Kasta, who's a follower and maybe even a Haugesund fan, I think, which is not too many of them around that have commented on this podcast anyway in the past. So great to see. He says, Jostein Grindhaug is a FK Haugesund legend, but do they, brackets we, need to make a managerial change now? The relegation zone gets closer every season. And just to give a bit of context to that, they are 14th out of 16 in the league. They are in that relegation playoff section at the moment with just 5 points all season, Steve. What do you think?
Yeah, this question really caught my eye from Johannes Kasta. I've actually just followed him back on the account because he's the first Haugesund fan I know that's ever asked a question to NFP. Like, seriously, I always ask the question, get in touch. Any Haugesund fans out there, we're really interested to hear from you. And if he's been listening regularly, he'll know that I've been quite negative about this club heading into the season, worried about what the pre-season, I predicted them to be bottom of the table. And what I've seen so far...
He also, sorry, just to try, he also asks, how many points do you need to avoid relegation from Eliteserien? So maybe factor that into your answer.
Yeah. I mean, Haugesund they do have 5 points on the board. The 2 0-0 draws they've had recently, I think they've been second best in. Certainly the Sarpsborg game. So they've been riding their luck. I mean, I suppose keeping 2 clean sheets in a row is a positive, but the manager, I think, has done a good job at the club, and I feel like he maybe deserves some time. Jostein Grindhaug, you got to respect what he's done here. I wouldn't sack him or anything yet. The only reason I would sack him is if you're trying to get like a motivational manager in to make an impact at some point where they really need to get points quickly. I don't think the manager's the problem here. I just think the club itself has had a few average transfer windows. The squad is small. They are, of course, limited resources. I asked in the pre-season show, what is a good season for Haugesund? And I don't know, just survival, I guess. they don't really have an identity. That's the problem. You know, I never really. They're probably the one team I avoid watching now, because it used to be Sarpsborg, but now it's probably Argosund. But I just don't get really excited seeing them play. They've done the best they can in recent years with the resources they have, but no, I wouldn't sack him yet. But the relegation zone does get closer every season, as Johan has said. How many points do you need this year? I think it's a very competitive league. I think you need to be looking at 30 plus points this year, potentially. I don't think we're going to have a year where, I think there was a year when Darlan went down or got in the playoff and 23 points got you in the playoff. No, not this year. I think you're going to be needing at least 28, 29 to get in the playoff. So it's one of those years where you're not just going to have a mid to low 20 points and have a chance of survival. You need to get more wins on the board, I think. And I'm certainly very worried about Argosund. I mean, the positive for me is that they've got 5 points, and that's probably the most they could have at this stage. They've literally maximized what they can have in their games, that's a good sign, isn't it? You know, they're not throwing points away, at least. They're experienced. I know you've got a bit of a soft spot for them, so you're hoping they can survive, Jonathan. But yeah, I am worried. I am worried.
Yeah, well, last season you needed 24 points to get into the relegation playoff, so that gives you a bit of maybe a bit of context. Grindhaug's been there since 2019. He's also been there as a sporting director. Actually, he's done a lot of things, and maybe he might have even been a tea lady at some point, because he's had a lot of roles there. So he is an experienced person, has been around the block. I'm just wondering who their sporting director is, because you mentioned there that they sort of maybe recruitment is the area that they're lacking in. Not entirely sure who
they've had some okay hits. It feels like the last couple of years have been just bang average, in that sort of thing. And we talk about relegation. I ask myself the question: do I see them, better than? Do I see 3 clubs worse than them? I suppose you could say 2, really, because the playoff usually does favour the team in Eliteserien. Do I see 2 or 3 definitely worse than them? I'm not sure. I mean, Arlesund have had a bad start, but maybe they can rebound. HamKam, Godset, maybe Sandefjord in time. There's not many others that spring to mind. That's the concern. This year, it's a strong league, and that's why I think another reason why I'm worried about them.
Yeah, and I think their sporting director is Eirik Oppedal. So maybe he has a few questions to answer. Like, maybe we could even get him on the show. Who knows? But yeah, thank you so much for that question. It's great to see a Haugesund fan, Johannes Caster. So yeah, we really appreciate that. And that's a good one there. Steve, we've got 1 or 2 more questions before we wrap up the show. Mainly really about Brann. Do you think Brann have a realistic chance at the title this year? That's Joe Clark at RW3 Time Lord. And there's been quite a few questions about Brann this season. They've been they've really added to the league this year, haven't they, so far? And what do you think to that question?
Same answer I've said before. They certainly won't be winning the gold medal. I'm not even sure they're going to get a medal. Watch out for a piece that's going to come out soon that I've been writing on our Y-Scout blog. It's going to be on Brann. There's some interesting stuff on there, but I'm not sure their style can be sustained throughout the whole season. They're incredibly high press, high energy, that sort of thing. The squad is small. I think the second half of the season, their results are going to be average, and they do lack a plan B. We saw that tonight against Sandefjord. We saw it against Odd. When they cannot break a side down, I'm not sure what their alternative is. They haven't got like a target man they can bring on. They don't seem to mix up the play too much. They look great, and they are going to have a good season. They're going to finish, I think, probably top 5, 6. But I don't see them certainly winning the gold medal. If they get a medal, I'm not going to be shocked, but I still would be slightly surprised. I think they're in overrated territory, Jonathan. Every week I look at the odds with the bookies, and they're massively, I think, overrated in that term.
Yeah, I mean, any newly promoted side asking questions about winning the title, let's be honest, if they finish 5th or 6th, like you just said there, they probably snap your hand off. I mean, that would still be a fantastic season.
Of course, yeah.
Obviously there's a context there, but
yeah,
maybe, like you say, maybe you spotted that there's a bit of value there because maybe they're being a little bit overvalued by people, which, if you're in the betting markets, which you are, it's maybe that's always a bit of inside information, isn't it? Knowledge is power. So thanks for that question. Great to see another question from maybe someone who doesn't always ask questions. I think Joe Clark. So appreciate that. Steve, there's 2 more talking points, which we're going to touch on. Glimt, who are obviously doing really well, and Arlesund, some big news there.
Yeah, I'm going to finish the show with we're talking about Arlesund here because they have now sacked the manager Lars-Arne Nielsen. It happened after they lost against Molde in the midweek round last week. I did say on the show it was probably imminent that it was going to happen. Marius Bo took over on the interim. They got a draw against Haugesund. I was disappointed. I really think it's a match you've got to be winning. At least they got a point, but they still haven't scored a goal this season yet, which is ridiculous, isn't it? The state of these 6 games. It's Norway. It's not France or something. I mean, come on. Not good enough. They need to look. They've sacked Lars-Arne Nielsen, which okay. I'm not going to knock him for that because if results are not good, his style of football is never going to go down well. So now they need to move in a completely different direction. They need to get an attack-minded manager in, get the fans on side by at least playing some decent football, and actually give it a damn good go. So the next appointment is really important for Arlesund, in my opinion. They cannot just bring in a clone of Lars-Arne Nielsen. They need to bring in someone. Maybe look at the Obos, right, and see what coaches are doing well in Obos that we like a style for, and maybe bring one of these managers in from one of the semi-pro clubs, something like that. I'm not, or see who's out of
Sean Constable, maybe.
Why not? Why not? Yeah, maybe look at some assistants around the league. Wink, wink. Who've got some credentials before. I think I'd like to see Arlesund take a bit of a splash in the deep end here, right? Take a gamble because it can't get any worse, can it? 1 point after 6 games, no goals. I want to see
no goals. That's crazy.
I want to see them. have a really exciting managerial appointment. Don't please hire someone boring here. But yeah, first managerial sack in mid-season in Eliteserien for we think 18, 19 months, something like that. So it was an incredible run. I do wonder, is it going to be a London bus syndrome now? Are we going to see some more managers go? Rekdal mentions under pressure. Vergoma always feels under pressure, although he's got a good win against Rosenborg now. Grindhaug at Haugesund, is he starting to backfield? Could he bite the dust as well? So I just wonder. I think we're due quite a few managers to be maybe sacked in Eliteserien this season.
Yeah, 18, 19 months without a sacking in Eliteserien, and in the Premier League, it's been roughly, in Leeds United, it's been roughly 18, 19 minutes without sacking, which is some sort of record as well. So great times all around. We'll leave it there for the show. Arlesund, of course, have now got a new manager. You said it's an interim, Steve.
Interim, yeah, we don't know the new manager yet at the time of recording.
So, Nielsen bites the dust there for no goals. And that's the end of this show. So thank you so much. Of course, on our Patreon, patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast, you can go and listen to our Eliteserien 10 to watch. We also have fantasy discussions on there. So it's well worth subscribing if you fancy it. We didn't have a show last week, but of course I was away and Steve was a little bit occupied. So we will hope to have a show this week coming. And of course, you've got things like the 10 to watches as well, player analysis. We have a Y Scout blog, as you mentioned, coming out soon, Steve, which we will tweet on Twitter at Nordic Footpod. And of course, we've brought you some exclusive interviews this week. So hopefully you are getting full value on the Nordic Football Podcast. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. And just generally spread the word, because I do feel like this season, Steve, we've had a lot of engagement, which has been great to see.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, take care, and we'll see you around next time. Goodbye.